On a quiet summer afternoon in Santa Cruz, an 8-year-old girl stepped outside her apartment to play. She never made it home. There were no screams, no broken doors, no sign of a struggle. Just a sudden, terrifying absence, inside a place everyone believed was safe. What no one knew yet was that the danger wasn't lurking in the shadows. It was waiting right next door. In the summer of 2015, Santa Cruz, California felt like the kind of place where nothing truly bad was supposed to happen. A coastal town shaped by ocean air, art studios, and tight-knit neighborhoods. The kind of place where parents let their guard down just a little, because it felt safe. Madyson Maddy Middleton was 8 years old, small for her age, bright-eyed. Curious, she lived with her mother, Laura Jordan, inside the Tannery Arts Center, an apartment complex known for its creative residents and family-friendly atmosphere. Kids played outside. Neighbors recognized each other. Doors were often left unlocked. Maddy loved to draw. She loved animals. And like most children her age, she loved simple summer joys. Being outdoors, riding her scooter, knocking on friends' doors to see who could come out and play. July 26, 2015 was supposed to be one of those ordinary days. It was a Sunday. Warm, but not oppressive. The kind of afternoon where time moves slowly and nothing feels urgent. Laura Jordan was home. Maddy was nearby. There was no sense of danger. No reason to believe the day would end any differently than all the others before it. At some point that afternoon, Maddy stepped outside the apartment. Just for a bit. Just to play. She didn't pack a bag. She didn't tell anyone goodbye. She didn't know she was walking into the last moments of her life. Inside the tannery complex, people went about their routines. Groceries were carried inside. Doors opened and closed. Footsteps echoed down shared walkways. Somewhere nearby, a teenage boy was inside his apartment, someone Maddy had seen before, someone familiar enough not to raise alarms. This wasn't a stranger lurking in a dark alley. This was someone who lived there. Minutes passed, then more minutes. When Laura Jordan realized Maddy hadn't come back, concern crept in quietly at first. Parents know that feeling, the shift from calm to unease. She called out. She looked around the complex. She checked with neighbors. No one had seen her. As the minutes stretched longer, panic replaced confusion. What began as a simple search quickly became something heavier, something frightening. Calls were made. People started looking more urgently. The sense of safety that once defined the complex began to fracture. By the time police were notified, the mood had changed entirely. Officers arrived. Questions were asked. Flyers would soon be printed. A community that had spent years believing it was insulated from true horror was now facing a nightmare they couldn't explain. There were no immediate signs of violence. No blood. No broken windows. No obvious suspect. Just an 8-year-old girl. Gone. And as neighbors gathered, whispering theories and retracing steps, one detail remained hidden in plain sight. The truth wasn't miles away. It wasn't the result of a random abduction. It was already inside the complex, moving unnoticed, watching the search unfold, blending into the crowd. And while Santa Cruz held its breath, hoping for a miracle, the reality waiting to be discovered was far darker than anyone imagined. By mid-afternoon on July 26, 2015, the Tannery Arts Center was humming with ordinary activity. Neighbors came and went, some carrying groceries, others walking dogs. The warm California sun lit the complex in a deceptively peaceful glow. Madyson Middleton, an energetic 8-year-old with a wide smile and curious eyes, had wandered outside for a moment of play. She was safe, everyone assumed. But that sense of security would vanish in minutes. Maddy was last seen walking near the hallways of the apartment complex, a small figure in a world that suddenly felt too large. She was alone, yet not unfamiliar with her surroundings. After all, she had lived there long enough to know most of the residents. Her mother, Laura Jordan, was inside, busy with household tasks, unaware that her daughter's playful wanderings would soon turn into a nightmare. When Maddy didn't return after a few minutes, Laura felt a flicker of unease. It was easy to dismiss at first. Children sometimes lose track of time, she told herself, but instinct quickly sharpened her concern. She called for Maddy, her voice echoing down the corridors. But there was no response. Neighbors, too, were unaware that anything was wrong. The complex, usually filled with the sounds of children playing and doors closing, was eerily quiet in that moment. By the time Laura realized her daughter was truly missing, fear had settled like a weight in her chest. She began searching every corner of the complex, calling out Maddy's name. Panic crept into her voice, betraying the dread she tried to suppress. She ran to neighbors, asking if anyone had seen her. Everyone shook their heads, confusion and concern etched into their faces. The hours stretched on, calls were made to the police, and an investigation began almost immediately. Officers combed the apartment complex, interviewing residents, checking hallways, stairwells, and back doors. Flyers would later be posted, spreading Maddy's face across Santa Cruz. Social media lit up with the story, strangers sharing her picture, hoping someone had seen her. The sense of calm that had defined the Tannery Arts Center shattered entirely. Yet, amid the frantic search, there was no visible clue. No signs of struggle. No forced entry. No immediate evidence pointing to who might have taken Maddy, or why. It was as if the apartment complex itself had swallowed her whole. Friends and family clung to hope, while the police faced a chilling reality. The disappearance of a child is never simple. What the community didn't know, what nobody could have guessed, was that Maddy had been lured by someone she had seen before, someone she might have even thought of as familiar, or at least safe. In a cruel twist, the danger wasn't outside, waiting in the shadows. It was already inside the walls of the place she called home. As the evening settled, the search continued, growing more desperate by the hour. Neighbors joined in, their anxiety mounting. Police barricades would later appear, and detectives would speak in hushed tones, mapping the apartment complex, retracing the small steps Maddy had taken. A sense of collective dread hung over the community. Santa Cruz had been forced to confront a terrifying question. How could a child disappear without a trace in a place everyone believed was safe? And while the search intensified, the truth remained hidden in plain sight. The person responsible was close, watching, calculating, blending seamlessly into the world around him. By the time the first chilling discoveries were made, the damage was already done. Madyson Middleton's disappearance would shake a community, ignite a national conversation, and eventually reveal a darkness that lurks far closer to home than anyone ever wants to imagine. In the Tannery Arts Center, just steps away from where Madyson Middleton played, lived a boy who would change the course of that community forever. Adrian Jerry Gonzalez was 15 years old at the time, living with his family in the same apartment complex as Maddy and her mother. On the surface, he seemed like any other teenager, quiet, unassuming, someone neighbors recognized but rarely interacted with. Yet behind the familiar face lurked a darkness no one could have anticipated. Adrian had a reputation for being reclusive, spending long stretches of time inside his apartment. He had interests that seemed unusual but harmless. A fascination with yo-yos, for example, and frequent posts on social media expressing suicidal thoughts. Small quirks that, in hindsight, hinted at a troubled inner world, but were never seen as threats, until that fateful day. When Maddy disappeared, no one suspected the boy living next door. He blended into the search, walking among neighbors and police, appearing concerned, offering to help. His curiosity was subtle, almost invisible. He asked questions about the investigation, inquired about procedures, and observed the growing panic with a calm that would later chill those who learned the truth. While the apartment complex frantically searched for Maddy, Adrian was closer to her fate than anyone imagined. The fact that he was someone familiar to Maddy and her mother made the situation even more disturbing. He had crossed paths with her before, but only under normal, innocent circumstances. There was no immediate suspicion that he could be capable of violence. And yet, in that ordinary afternoon, he made choices that would leave a community shattered. Adrian's behavior after the disappearance reflected a chilling combination of awareness and detachment. He did not flee. He did not panic in public. Instead, he attempted to blend in, taking part in the search and interacting with law enforcement, all while carrying the knowledge of what he had done. It was a calculated calm, one that later investigators would describe as eerily methodical for someone of his age. Behind closed doors, Adrian had already committed acts no child should ever imagine. He lured Maddy into his apartment, restrained her, and assaulted her before ending her life. Every action was deliberate, executed with a disturbing level of premeditation for a 15-year-old. His later confessions would reveal the grim details. But even without them, his ability to maintain a facade of normalcy during the search painted a haunting picture of his mindset. Neighbors would recall that, in the days following Maddy's disappearance, Adrian seemed unusually composed, often watching the activity around the complex from a distance. There were no telltale signs of guilt on the surface, but the subtlety of his actions betrayed a calculated awareness. In a community struggling to understand how a child could vanish so suddenly, the idea that the culprit was someone so close, someone they thought they knew, was almost impossible to accept. It was in this tension between appearance and reality that the horror of the situation grew. The boy next door, who should have been just another teenager navigating school in summer days, had crossed a line no one could have anticipated. And as investigators began piecing together evidence, the neighborhood would come to a terrifying realization. The person responsible for Maddy's disappearance was not a stranger. He was someone who had walked the same hallways, shared the same spaces, and even pretended to care. This proximity, this closeness to the victim, would define the case in the months and years to come. It wasn't just a crime. It was a betrayal of the community's trust. A violation so intimate and incomprehensible that it would haunt Santa Cruz for years, and it set the stage for the chilling details that would later emerge about the crime itself. On the afternoon of July 26, 2015, what began as an ordinary summer day turned into a nightmare that would haunt Santa Cruz forever. Madyson Maddy Middleton, an 8-year-old girl with an infectious smile and a curious spirit, had been lured into the apartment of her neighbor, Adrian Gonzalez, a boy just 15 years old at the time. What unfolded inside those walls was a sequence of horrors that would shock the community and ultimately challenge the legal system itself. According to Gonzalez's later confessions, he had only made the decision to act that day. He offered Maddy ice cream, a small, seemingly innocent gesture. But as she reached for it, the facade of normalcy vanished. He duct-taped her mouth shut, preventing her screams from being heard, and carried her to his room. Maddy struggled, tried to fight back, and screamed, but her resistance was met with brutal force. Gonzalez admitted that he began to choke her, a struggle that lasted long enough for horror to fully set in, but which he now cannot recall with precise timing. In his testimony years later, Gonzalez recounted the chilling thought process that led him to murder. He admitted he could not have sexual intercourse with Maddy. She was a child, and in a moment of panic and warped reasoning, decided to kill her instead. "I wasn't really thinking, I was just reacting," he said, describing a detachment from morality that is difficult for adults to comprehend, let alone a 15-year-old. After ending Maddy's life, he concealed the body in a dumpster within the apartment complex, hiding the evidence of his actions as if burying them could erase the crime itself. Even after committing the murder, Gonzalez's actions displayed a level of calculated composure that unnerved investigators. He left the apartment and walked to a friend's apartment, carrying a birthday gift, as if nothing had happened. They went out to Chipotle together, passing by people searching for Maddy, Gonzalez later admitted he was trying to blend in, to avoid suspicion, all while knowing the truth of what he had done. He interacted with neighbors, asked police officers casual questions about the investigation, and presented a calm exterior that masked the monstrous reality beneath. What makes the crime even more harrowing is the betrayal of trust. Maddy had been familiar with Gonzalez. He lived just doors away. Their families knew each other. There was no stranger lurking outside. This horror came from someone the community assumed was safe, someone who walked among them daily. The closeness amplified the tragedy, transforming the Tannery Arts Center from a place of creative life and ordinary routines into a scene of incomprehensible betrayal. Gonzalez's confessions during his release hearings years later only deepened the understanding of his mindset. He described each step of the crime with chilling calmness, pausing deliberately as he recounted the moments when Maddy struggled, when he bound her, and when he ended her life. He admitted he had no consideration of the weight of murder beyond hiding what he had already done. It was not an act of passion or sudden rage. It was a conscious, horrifying decision executed with eerie detachment. The crime sent shockwaves through Santa Cruz and the nation. A community once defined by ordinary summer days and coastal calm had been confronted with the unimaginable. An innocent child abducted, assaulted, and murdered by someone they had seen every day. The details, once revealed, would force parents, neighbors, and officials to confront questions about juvenile crime, psychological evaluation, and the boundaries of accountability. And while the discovery of Maddy's body would soon bring Gonzalez under arrest, the memory of the crime, its meticulous planning, its betrayal of trust, and the coldness of his actions would linger, casting a shadow over the community that no trial could fully erase. The murder of Madyson Middleton did more than shatter a family and a community. It ignited a national conversation about justice, juvenile offenders, and the law. Adrian Gonzalez, only 15 years old at the time of the crime, was arrested just 2 days after Maddy's disappearance. Initially, prosecutors charged him as an adult, a move that stirred immediate debate. How could a teenager be held fully accountable for such a brutal act? And, more importantly, should the law allow for life imprisonment in cases involving minors? In November 2017, Gonzalez pleaded not guilty as the trial began. Public outrage was intense. Parents, advocacy groups, and the media closely followed every development. On one side, prosecutors argued that Gonzalez's age did not diminish the severity of his actions. On the other, defense attorneys and legal experts contended that the juvenile brain is still developing, and that even a crime of this magnitude required careful consideration of rehabilitation potential. The legal battle became more complicated with the introduction of California's Proposition 57 in 2016, which gave judges discretion to decide whether juveniles should be tried as adults. Then, in 2019, the California legislature passed Senate Bill 1391, a law that prohibited 14- and 15-year-olds from being prosecuted as adults under any circumstances. The law was later upheld by the state Supreme Court in 2021, cementing a legal framework that drastically affected Gonzalez's sentencing. Instead of facing life in adult prison, he was to be incarcerated in a juvenile facility until he turned 25. With the possibility of extended detention if a jury determined he remained a danger. The controversy surrounding Gonzalez's case went beyond legal technicalities. Critics argued that allowing a child to commit such a violent act without adult sentencing options could undermine justice and public safety. Supporters of SB 1391 emphasized rehabilitation and the science of adolescent brain development, asserting that minors, even those who commit severe crimes, can change with proper treatment. The tension between these perspectives highlighted the challenges of balancing punishment, public safety, and the possibility of reform. As the legal proceedings unfolded, the public closely watched Gonzalez's time in the Department of Juvenile Justice. He participated in extensive rehabilitation programs, including sex offender treatment and therapy, focused on accountability and the impact of his actions on victims. Letters were written, exercises completed, and phases progressed, all designed to address his behavior, the trauma involved, and potential risks of reoffending. These programs, while controversial in some circles, reflected California's broader approach to juvenile justice, a focus on rehabilitation alongside accountability. By the time the DJJ closed in 2023, Gonzalez was transferred to a secure youth treatment facility in Sonoma County, continuing his rehabilitation. Yet even as he approached his 25th birthday in 2024, questions remained. Was he truly reformed? Could he be safely released into the community? A jury trial in July 2024 addressed these questions, ultimately deciding that Gonzalez remained a danger and should not be released. The verdict underscored the ongoing tension between legal protections for juveniles and the severity of certain crimes. Throughout the trial and its aftermath, the case exposed the limits and challenges of the justice system. California law had evolved to protect minors from adult prosecution, but it also had to confront the reality that some juvenile crimes are extraordinarily serious. Madyson Middleton's murder forced lawmakers, judges, and the public to grapple with complex questions. How do we balance rehabilitation and punishment? How do we define danger and responsibility when a child commits an unthinkable act? And, perhaps most hauntingly, how does a community heal when the perpetrator is someone so close to home? In the end, the trial did more than determine a sentence. It sparked a national debate about justice, age, and accountability. It highlighted the difficult choices lawmakers face when defining juvenile justice, and reminded the public that some crimes, no matter the age of the offender, leave scars that will never fully fade. The murder of Madyson Middleton left a permanent scar on Santa Cruz, a community that once believed it was insulated from true horror. In the years following her death, the legal and emotional aftermath unfolded in ways that continued to captivate and disturb the public. Adrian Gonzalez, the boy who committed the crime at just 15 years old, remained incarcerated, his path shaped by rehabilitation programs, court rulings, and repeated evaluations of his risk to society. After being sentenced to juvenile detention under Senate Bill 1391 in April 2021, Gonzalez entered the Department of Juvenile Justice, where he participated in extensive treatment programs. These programs focused on understanding the psychological factors that contributed to his actions, acknowledging the trauma of his upbringing, and taking responsibility for the life he had taken. Gonzalez wrote letters from both his own perspective and what he imagined to be Maddy's and her mother's perspectives. He completed multiple phases of sex offender treatment and group therapy, exercises designed to encourage reflection and accountability. Yet, despite these structured interventions, the shadow of the crime loomed large. When the DJJ closed in June 2023, Gonzalez was transferred to a secure youth treatment facility in Sonoma County. The transition did not mark freedom but continued custody, as California law requires that juveniles who pose ongoing risks be periodically evaluated before any possibility of release. By 2024, as Gonzalez approached his 25th birthday, the legal system had to confront a pressing question. Was he rehabilitated, and could he safely re-enter society? A probable cause hearing in July 2024 was the first step in this process. Prosecutors argued that Gonzalez remained a danger, citing the severity of the original crime and his age at the time, while defense attorneys emphasized his completion of rehabilitation programs and efforts toward accountability. The hearing concluded with a jury trial, which lasted 3.5 months. Gonzalez himself took the stand, walking through the events of the crime in meticulous detail, recounting the moments leading up to Maddy's abduction, her resistance, and the chilling aftermath. He described actions taken to blend in with the search for Maddy, and admitted the calculated attempts to avoid immediate suspicion, yet did not fully explain why he committed the crime, a haunting reminder of the psychological complexity of juvenile offenders. The jury ultimately decided that Gonzalez should not be released, affirming that he continued to pose a risk to the community. Under California law, this determination allows for custody extensions every 2 years until he is deemed no longer dangerous. Prosecutors emphasized that the decision reflected the ongoing impact of the crime on the community, noting that the emotional and psychological consequences of Maddy's murder remain deeply felt, even as Gonzalez serves his sentence. Questions linger. Could he eventually be rehabilitated to the point of safe reintegration into society? How does a community heal when the perpetrator is a peer of the victim, someone who shared familiar spaces and routines? And what do Maddy's family and the public carry forward in the face of such violence? For Laura Jordan, the loss of her daughter is permanent, a wound that no legal decision can fully close. Her grief is a stark reminder of the human cost behind headlines, trials, and legal debates. The case also continues to spark discussion about juvenile justice policies in California and nationwide. SB 1391, Proposition 57, and subsequent legal interpretations highlight the tension between protecting youth under the law and ensuring public safety in extreme cases. Maddy's murder forced legislators, courts, and citizens alike to confront the unsettling truth that even children are capable of horrific acts, and that the law must navigate a delicate balance between accountability and the potential for rehabilitation. Nearly a decade after that summer day in 2015, the shadow of Madyson Middleton's murder remains. The neighborhood, the courts, and the public continue to grapple with the questions the crime raised. Questions that have no simple answers. And while Gonzalez remains in custody, the legacy of that day, the fear, the loss, and the unresolved trauma, lingers, a chilling reminder that some mysteries are never truly closed.